Hello, individuals and other individuals. I am Don of Caricatures by Don. I recently posted a video of myself doing a caricature sketch of James Van Der Beek, and I put that up on my YouTube, and the response to it has been surprisingly good. In just under a week, I'm just coming up on the 100 views mark. I know that's not numbers for like full-time YouTubers with thousands of followers, but for me, that was a lot more than I was expecting. I thought maybe I'd get like 10 people watching this video, but I'm very grateful for the numbers. Thank you very much for those of you who have watched it, liked it, subscribed, etc. I decided to strike while the iron was hot, as it were, and move on to the next name on my follower request month list, which was actor Jonathan Bailey. So I recorded myself drawing him, and again, talked about my process and so on as I went along. And so here's that video now. Hope that you enjoy it. Thank you. I'm getting ready to draw Jonathan Bailey, who is the next name on my list from my follower request month. One thing that's going to make him different from the sketch I did of James Van Der Beek is that James Van Der Beek I had heard of before. When Jonathan Bailey's name came up on my follower requests, I was completely unfamiliar with the name. I had to look him up to find out that he's an actor from Bridgerton, which I have never watched. As with the previous video, you can see that I have multiple reference photos to work from here. Always advisable. And from somewhat different angles, so I can see his face from different points of view. And certain features may stand out more prominently from some angles than they will from others. Again, I prefer to do a 3/4, so I'll most likely predominantly refer to either this photo or this one here. I think I might go with this one because I like that hair swoop. I think I can do something with that. The first thing that I notice with Jonathan Bailey is his head shape. I can see he's got a wider cranium that kind of narrows down. He's got a rounder face shape that goes narrower toward the bottom than at the forehead. So I'm going to play with that some. I'm going to give him a wider forehead coming down to a smaller chin like that. I've already started too high on the page. I'm going to move it down now. Again, you can see I'm being very loose for now. He's got kind of a prominent brow there. It comes in deep from this point into his eye, and then his face, rather than coming all the way back out to meet that, is more receded like this. So I'm gonna play with that shape there, and keeping the top of his head much wider than the bottom part. If you've done any kind of portrait work, you probably know this trick that I'm doing here now of drawing a center line down the middle of the page. For those of you who are not familiar with that, that is the line where the eyes are going to sit. The line across is where the eyes are going to sit. This center line is where it's going to be like right down the middle of his face. That'll help me recognize where I need to place these features. His nose, he doesn't have a large nose, but it does seemed to kind of stick out pretty far from his face. So I'm going to play with that a little. Now, this is a good example of where it's good to have multiple reference photos, because in this one, if I just look at one photo, it's hard for me to tell whether or not he has particularly large eyes. So I'm going to take a look at the others. They don't appear to be very large in these other photos. So I will not be giving him large eyes. They do have that kind of hooded downward slant. He's got a bit of a fold under his eye. A lot of people think that I'm drawing eye bags when I draw that in there. It's not eye bags, it's just a fold under the eye. Everybody has them. I'm not seeing anything particularly unique about the size or shape of his mouth here. So that will probably remain just pretty generic. There is a challenge, more of a challenge, when you're drawing somebody that you've never seen before. Of course, it's a skill that caricaturists, particularly ones who hire themselves out for live events, have to be familiar with, because that's what we do. We draw people that we've never seen before. One thing I don't know, for some reason I find fun is when the ear has this backward slant to it. I like to push that. It's little things like that that I find fun to distort. Things like big noses, big chins, big eyes, whatever, high foreheads, etc. These are things that people automatically recognize and associate with caricature. I like being able to find features that aren't quite so typical, like that slant of the ear. It's not only more fun, but also will help sell the likeness better when you can pick up on everything, including the things that maybe aren't quite so immediately apparent. One bad habit I do admit I have is I tend to start large so that I run out of room on the page, especially over on this side. I tend to run off the side of the page, which is unfortunate in this particular case, because he's got some big, luxurious hair, and I'm going to miss a lot of that, unfortunately, unless I start all over again, which I don't really feel like doing right now. One thing that I have learned about caricature is that the neck can support the likeness just as much as any of the facial features. If somebody has a substantial thick neck on them and you draw it skinny, the face will still be recognizable because all the facial features are right, they are there, and people will still be able to recognize who you're drawing. But if you draw the neck to the proportion that it is in reality, or exaggerate that, if he has a particularly thick neck and you exaggerate a really thick one, or if he has a very thin neck and you exaggerate it down to a very skinny, that's actually going to help make it more recognizable too. Maybe I'm going to try to exaggerate the downward slope of his eyes some more. I'm looking now for things. I think I've got a solid likeness here. Again, it's a little harder for me to tell being unfamiliar with his face. But once I feel comfortable with the likeness, that's when I go start looking for things that I can exaggerate more. I think I'm getting a likeness here. Let me just take a look at my other photos here to see whether there's anything I'm missing. There are going to be a little bit of forehead lines there. Not seeing anything else there. If I look at him from another angle, I can see from that one that I don't quite have the shape of the nose right. I can see that there's a bit of a bump there in the middle of his nose. I like to loosely sketch in also the shape of this side of the nose, even though that's not immediately obvious in the photo. I like to kind of at least loosely sketch it in to help me see the third dimension. All right, there we have the very basic rough sketch, and now I'm going to go in and start finalizing some of those details. Like I said in my previous video, I usually start doing so with the hair. It's harder for me to see in this photo the shadows in the hair. It almost looks like just one big dark shape. I am going to take a bit of artistic license and add some highlights myself to represent more form. So again, it looks like the light is coming mostly from above, maybe this sort of angle, and so the highlights are going to be hitting the top and right hand side. So here it's still going to be pretty dark. But then there, and this area here, I'm going to keep it lighter. I also enjoy messy hair. It's kind of fun to draw. It feels loose and free, but also represents reality. Very seldom do people have hair that is absolutely perfectly sculpted. There's always little stray hairs, and I like to include those as well. I'm treating this in shapes again. I can see one shape here in this part of his hair, another shape here. So I'm going to separate it first into those shapes before going in to the interior of those shapes to fine-tune them, further break them down. Sometimes With caricature more so than with straight portrait, you need to judiciously decide where to ignore what you see in the photo to support the exaggerations you've chosen. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. You can see in this photo, the hair at the back of his neck comes down to meet his collar. But because I've made his neck extra long, if I do that, if I bring the hair all the way down, it's going to look like he has a mullet or something. And that's not the look I'm going for. That's not his hairstyle. So I'm finding a compromise. Really, his hair, if I was doing realistic, would come down about this far. But his collar is way down there. So I think I'm going to go somewhere halfway in between. And that'll help indicate the length of his hair without sacrificing the exaggerations. Now I'm fine-tuning those hair shapes I drew, sketched out, going inside each one individually to define the sub-shapes. That's not a word, probably. The shapes within the shapes. Always a good idea to keep your pencils sharp. I mentioned this when I was making my first video, and then I think I edited it out. A sharp pencil, especially when doing hair, but not exclusively, will help get a more realistic rendering of those fine hairs. I sharpened it at this point, especially because I'm about to start doing the hair at his temples, where you can see more individual strokes. And so I want to keep my pencil good and sharp in order to get those without muddying up the details. Back here, his hair is mostly in shadow, and so I can afford to have a little duller pencil, because you're not going to see as many of those fine details. There's still some indication there you can see of the direction of the hairs. It still looks like there are individual hairs there. It's not just one big shape, but they're less defined here because it's in shadow. Again, I want to be clear that I don't claim that this is the only right way or the best way to render a caricature. This is just the approach I use. A lot of artists put less detail into the hair. They're not trying to make it look like you can see each individual hair. This is just a thing that I like to do. All right, hair is done. Now I'm going to begin shading starting with the forehead up here. Again, you can see there's a highlight right there and here on this part of the brow. So I'm going to leave those white on my drawing, but all around that, I'm going to have at least a little bit of color in these lighter areas. And then I can see a clear shadow on this side of the head. So that's where it's going to be darker. Maybe not quite as dark as the hair as I have established it, but that's going to be one of the darker areas of the skin anyway. I can see a bit of highlight here. There can be some subtle shapes in the forehead, ridges, contours. Contours is a better word. Like this shape or that contour right there. For the sake of realism in my rendering, I like to be aware of those and represent them. I'm going to erase the center line I drew earlier, otherwise it's going to interfere with the highlights I'm leaving here on the forehead. Now with eyebrows, I'm going to do something similar to what I did with the hair, where I'm going to want to be able to see the texture of it. And so rather than coloring the way I did here with steady, even stroke, this is going to be more like individual strokes, again with a sharpened pencil. Oftentimes I find that something that I've tried to draw dark, when I start coloring the areas around it, I realize it still isn't as dark as I could have gone. So I'll go in and start adding more shadows. When I'm drawing the eyebrows here, at first it was blending right in with the hair because it was the same level of darkness. So I'm adding even more darkness there at the edge of the hair to separate that from the eyebrow, because there is a very clear separation here. Again, I don't really see this amount of texture in the eyebrows in the photo, but I am taking a bit of artistic license with it. I'm trying to represent the big, thick brows, and so I want there to be some texture there. I want people to see that there's a lot of little hairs involved. Even the rendering can be part of the exaggerations. Even if I were doing a full color drawing, even the colors can be part of the exaggeration. I was just talking with somebody about this a few days ago, that if someone, as a good example, if somebody has particularly red cheeks, it can be fun, heighten the exaggeration on that by making them like really red. So it's similar to what I'm talking about with the rendering, where I'm enhancing the exaggeration by rendering it the way I am, rendering it beyond what is seen in the photo here. Here's a very small detail that nonetheless is kind of unique to certain faces, and therefore will add to the likeness if you can observe them. The way the corner of his eye here comes to like a fine point, like it's pinched together. I'm gonna exaggerate that a little too. even though it may not be something that people will pick up on and say, yeah, that's totally him, it will on some level affect how they perceive the likeness. If you can find and exaggerate tiny details like that. Here again, the rendering is going to help enhance the exaggeration because I'm making his brow heavier than it is in real life, which means that in theory, if his brow comes out further, the shadow under it is going to be darker. It's going to be more shielded. So I'm putting a darker shadow here than I'm seeing in the photo, just to try to exaggerate that heavy brow more. I often, in my loose rough sketching, will just do a round, what is this called anyway, this part of the anatomy? If anyone knows, feel free to let me know in the comments. This cover of the nostril here, I'll just draw a round shape, and then when I go to do the rendering, I remember that everyone, there are lots of different shapes for that part of the nose, and getting that right will also help hone the likeness just that much more. So I can see that his is shaped more like this. It's not a perfect round shape. Everything about the human face, there's no feature on the human face that you're going to want to draw the same way on every face. Every detail has some variation from one face to another. That's what makes everybody unique and what makes caricature more fun. This area under the nose is going to be one of your darkest shadows too, when the light source is from above. So don't be afraid to lean into it and make it really dark under there. In the nostril too. There's no light getting in there. Just subtle little creases around his eye here. They're not going to be very deep because that'll age him. I don't know how old Jonathan Bailey is. He doesn't appear to be a very old man. So we don't want to make these creases too deep or it's going to make him look older than he should. But they are there, so I want to at least include some representation of them. Not every ear is going to have that little crease right there. That's a fun thing for me to pick up on and try to, if not exaggerate, at least make sure I include it. And then again, I've heightened the likeness just that much more, even if it doesn't necessarily register with people that that's something that they identify with this face. It'll still be there to call attention to some of the things that make his face unique. One thing I know a lot of caricaturists struggle with. I've heard a lot of people talk about how they don't know how to draw good-looking people. When you exaggerate features, a lot of times the perception that people have is that you're making them ugly, and therefore if you exaggerate a good-looking person, it's not going to look like them anymore. My outlook on it, and what I usually tell people who ask me for advice in this area, is that the exaggerations are not about making somebody ugly. Exaggerations aren't in themselves ugly. And therefore, my advice, if you're struggling with drawing a caricature of good-looking people, is try to forget it. Try to put it out of your mind. Don't think of them as good-looking or not good-looking. Just think of it as a face. Just look at the face, find the things that make that face unique, and enhance those. Just don't worry about good-looking. That shouldn't be a caricature's focus. Likeness. It's all about likeness. Make it look like him. I said in my previous video, and I still stand by it, that hair is my least favorite thing to do. So usually that's one of the reasons that I do it first, is to get it over with. Unfortunately, with facial hair, which is still hair and therefore still tedious, I kind of have to put it off till later in the drawing, because if I do that first, then I'm going to be smudging it all over the place, even more than I'm already smudging this drawing by not training myself to draw with my hand resting on the page. Well, my phone with which I was recording this video stopped recording about 10 minutes before I was done the sketch, and I didn't notice. So, unfortunately, the documentation of my shading of his beard and neck is lost forever. That's okay. Here's the final drawing. Again, I'm not that familiar with Jonathan Bailey's face. If you are, feel free to let me know in the comments whether you think it looks like him or not. If you don't, that's okay. Go ahead and say it. I won't take offense to it. I have no problem with some creative criticism if you are not a jerk about it. So feel free to comment and let me know how you think this turned out. Thanks for watching the video. I'm Don of Caricatures by Don, and I haven't thought of a catchphrase to end my videos with yet. Bye. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, show it by hitting the like button. Subscribe, share, comment, do all those things that people do to show that they like videos these days. I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a good day.